Guys, it's about just finished the first official week of Thrive. Um, Lots that I learned, so I'm gonna keep the intro short. So the first kind of thing was there's the sermon last Sunday night. It was on habits, on the power of habits, and kind of one of the major things that I've heard for quite a while. Successful people do daily what unsuccessful people do occasionally, and just that doing little things right over a long period of time. There were kind of three major points in that sermon, which was to be future focused, to have spiritual vitality, and to just get started. And what messes a lot of people up with not being future focused is listening to wrong voices and them getting discouraged and giving up. They're looking in their rear view mirror instead of looking forward. They're looking at what happened in the past, and they're allowing their background. Like there's this quote that I really love that says, "Don't allow your background to become your limiter." And that was such a cool one. And then the second one, spiritual vitality. So there's future focus, spiritual vitality, and get started. Those were the three main points. With spiritual vitality, there were three different types of soil. There's hard, and the question was, am I receptive to God, to hear what he has to say? Shallow, am I growing deep, or am I just staying at the surface? And the third type of soil was thorny. Am I ruthless with distractions? Do I allow little things that are not important to distract me from what is truly important? So it was kind of talking about a garden with that spiritual vitality, that growing things in itself is easy, but growing the right things, growing the right habits can be very difficult. And the third point of getting started, one of the quotes from that was, or one of the things was to have a good strategy and a good attitude, and to be completely known and completely loved. So that was Sunday. Monday and Tuesday we went to City Impact in San Francisco in the Tenderloin. That was a super cool experience. One of the kind of major things that I learned was just the ability to pray for people. Just whenever, like if I'm talking with someone, like even yesterday, I think I probably prayed for 4 or 5 people, and that's not to be like, oh, yay me, I'm so whatever. It was just during that time, it was so normal to, when we were talking with people that were homeless, like whenever you were at the end of a conversation, you would just ask, hey, is there anything I can do to be praying for you? And both me and one of my friends, Josh Gilbert, were kind of said on the car ride home, gosh, why don't we do that to our friends around? Like, there's no difference. We all need prayer. We all have issues that we're working through. And so that was probably one of the coolest things for me. One of the cool things also that there was a specific sermon in San Francisco was the difference between a hired hand and the shepherd, of being someone who takes ownership of the situation instead of saying, it's not my problem because you're just a hired hand. And also just seeing that in the Tenderloin, in that level of homelessness and poverty, they can't hide their sin like a lot of people can if you have a little bit more money, a little bit more things, but that doesn't mean that the issues that they're going through aren't the same for me. And so that was a really cool heart check as well. There was a D time on Wednesday morning by John Harris, and one of the quotes that he said, he was kind of talking about D groups, our small groups that we have, and talking about that what we put into them is what we get out of them. And he said this quote by Tim Berry that says, passion isn't part-time. You're either in or you're out. And he had, I guess, 3 main points initially, which was to serve God first with my whole heart. Or these were 3 things that he felt specifically called to when he came to Bayside. To serve God with his whole heart, to serve the vision of the leader, and to do whatever he's asked with a great attitude and do it 100%. And a couple of things that he wanted us to have to really grow in was, the first one was hurry up and wait. Better to be there early than to be there late. Oh, that rhymed. Beautiful. The second one was to take initiative. Third one was to sacrifice, because it's not about me. Fourth was have discipline. 5 was to have perseverance. And the 6th was to have character and to protect it at all costs, because you can never, if you break your character, you can really never get it fully back. Integrity, to have servant-hearted, to have a great work ethic and a teachable spirit, and to have humility. So then, after that, on Wednesday, the same day, then we had our staff meeting, and we had Glenn, I can't remember his last name, but he's from Audacious Church in, I believe it's Australia or England. I'm sorry, I can't remember which one. But we were talking about having this domino effect that just one person doing a good thing or a thing in God's eyes can continue to move that forward. And he was talking about how men say yes and mean no, or say no and mean yes, but when God says yes, he means yes. God's promises are good. And one of the things he was talking about was how he had this building that he was trying to build, and it was $3.5 million, and then he had the money, and then something happened, and he had a week. And he literally got the money 10 minutes before they were going to foreclose on the property. And he said that something that struck me was God saw my problem before he even gave the promise for the solution. And honestly, my favorite quote was, "Problems never hinder promises." Daddy, you promised. He was talking about this time where he had taken his daughters said they were going to go and get ice cream. And there was this long line. He didn't have cash. They only took cash. The one ATM that was open in the mall they were at was what had like 60 people. And he was just like, we're just going to go home. But then his daughter was like, "Daddy, you promised." And so, in that same way, problems never hinder promises. I think that was such a cool thing. Later on that day, so all three of this have all been in the same day, was at Granite Bay High School. The high school ministry was called Measure Up, kind of talking about comparison, and talking about how we only desire things because that's what other people have. But where does that desire really come from? Does it come from God, or does it come from what other people have? So be aware of where ambition comes from, and kind of that was a good check for me of like where I'm trying to go and what I want, like what is driving that, and that's something I'm still working through. And there is, I guess, my favorite quote. Since I wrote it sideways, sometimes I'll write stuff instead of normally I'll write it sideways, and then I notice it. It says, "Where comparison ends, contentment begins." So that's, I hope that speaks to you. Then Thursday, so that would have been yesterday, we had D-Time again, talking about our small groups. There were kind of two major points about the small groups, and one of our core values is to risk real relationships. The other one is to encounter his lordship, discover his direction, and lead. Those are the four values of Thrive. The two major points was that was kind of talked about is man is the master of self-deception. So we're really good at lying to ourselves and not seeing our own flaws. In relationships, especially in close proximity, like these D groups will be, they're mirrors. They show us what we're not doing well so we can get better at it. That's not always fun, but it is beneficial. And relationships are training grounds. He was talking about that most people are not in any sort of a committed relationship before marriage, and that's why so many of them fail, is because they never learn how to be committed and work through their own issues in a way and resolve that conflict. They actually used a really funny example where Dina, one of the student life directors, was talking about the preference versus sacrifice and how that's such a big part in relationships. She gave the example, which this is not true, but she said she preferred Thai food, whereas I wanted to go to a vegan papaya place, which I don't think there even is one, but I thought it was a great example. And so she, even though she would way rather have Thai, gave up her preference to go and sacrifice to go where I wanted to theoretically go. So that was pretty funny. And then last night, Thursday night, Blake, again, one of the student life directors for Thrive School, did a sermon for the Bayside College Ministry, which is Thursday night. The name of it is Focus Your Fight. And it's called Lens, kind of shifting your perspective. So one of the things he talked about was in Matthew 6 of worry doesn't fix the problems of tomorrow, but it drains us of the energy today. So by focusing on what might not work in the future, we're actually killing the joy that we could be having today. He talked about finding versus becoming, trying to find the right person, trying to find the right job, trying to find the right thing versus becoming the right person, learning the right skills. And becoming, a lot of that comes down to, is God first in my life? And then versus now. A lot of times there's a fear of, if something bad happened in the past, what if that's going to happen now? And that will cause us to not risk those relationships, to not actually go out on a limb and just get to know people better. The third kind of point was theirs versus mine. And a lot of times it's what annoys me most in other people just shows my own weakness or my own insecurity. And kind of the last point, there is this guy, I don't remember his name was Daniel something, I think it was in 1939. He came in late to this exam, and he like was really well prepared. It was a math class. He's really well prepared for the exam, but then he was running late. Had a test that day, did the test. There were 2 questions on the board. He was like, okay, finished the test, turned it in, got those 2 questions, figured it out as best as he could, and was like, well, you know what, it is what it is. And there it is. Turned out that the 2 problems he had put on the board were impossible questions. They had literally never been solved. But because he wasn't there for when people put the limitations on those problems, he then was able to solve them. And I think I wrote, he did the impossible because he didn't know that it was impossible. No one had told, because he was late, he didn't hear that those were impossible questions. And what if he would have gotten there on time, and maybe he wouldn't have solved them because he had limited what was possible in his own mind. So yeah, that's a total of the last 4 days. So I know this is a long video. If you stay to the end, you're awesome. Yeah, thank you guys so much for all that you've done for me, and that's what I've kind of learned so far this week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.